just seemed on top of the world and happy and just full of life.
Three-time Olympic perfect.
Off the bottom, the crowd goes crazy.
Having your moods go back and forth, just like waves. You don't have any control over it. And you can't quite ride those waves. They just wash over you. It's extraordinarily painful.
Depression is dark, and you don't want to talk to people, and you don't want to connect, and you just want to be alone, and you want silence.
Get into the bath. Close your eyes, lie there in the heat. Enjoy the comfort. Now, pull the plug. This is what depression feels like.
It's like a headache. You'll tell yourself it's temporary and it'll pass. It's just another bad day. But it's not.
I feel lucky to be alive every single day. I vividly remember writing my suicide note. People don't get it. Like, I thought I was a burden to everyone who loved me because that's what my brain told me, because that's how powerful your brain is. I got off the bus. I walked slowly down the walkway of the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, people rode by me, drove by me, walked by me, and a woman approached me and she said, "Will you take my picture?" She said thanks and she walked away. It was that moment I just said, nobody cares. The reality was that everybody cared. I just couldn't see it. I ran forward and using my two hands, I catapulted myself into free fall. What I'm about to say is the exact same thing that 19 Golden Gate Bridge jump survivors have also said. The millisecond my hands left the rail, it was an instant regret. And I remember thinking, no one's gonna know that I didn't want to die. In 4 seconds I fell 75 miles an hour, 25 stories, and I hit the water. I was in the most physical pain I had ever experienced, I have ever experienced. The Coast Guard was amazing. He was just so freaked out that I was alive that he just dove in and brought me on board. The guy said, "Do you know how many people we pull out of this water that are already dead?" And I said, "No, and I don't want to know." The guy put his hand on my forehead, said, "Kid, you're a miracle." My father took one step into the hospital room, and I looked up at him and I said, "Dad, I'm sorry." And he said, "No, Kevin, I'm sorry." And if you think about it, both of our immediate reactions were guilt. Guilt that didn't belong to either of us. To the families who live with the loss or losses of loved ones, they didn't do that to hurt you or destroy your life. They took their lives because they were struggling and in a great deal of emotional and mental pain. Suicide, mental illness, and addiction are the only diseases that we blame the person for perpetually. But people die from suicide just like they died from any other organ diseased. Today, no matter the pain I'm in, no matter the struggles I experience, I do believe that life is the greatest gift we've ever been given. And if you're suffering mentally, don't wait like I did, sitting in denial for so long. Because recovery happens. I'm living proof.
Just want to, on a slightly more serious note, if I could, obviously there's been a great deal of loss in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years with, you know, some fantastic musicians, Bowie, who we talked about before, and then obviously a guy who you guys know well, knew well with Chris Cornell this year, and Chester as well. Just want to get sort of your thoughts on it, because we've been doing a bit on our show. We obviously relate to a lot of men, and we have a big problem in the country with, you know, a high suicide rate and stuff like that. And obviously it seems to affect even people that appear like they've got it all. I mean, it must really rock you guys as well when hearing news like that, and people that you think have got it all together.
You know, when it comes to someone like Chris Cornell or Chester, you know, depression is a disease, and everybody kind of goes through it their own way. I can't speak for anybody else's condition, but you know, the hardest part is when you lose a friend, you know. And I just always immediately think of their families and their bandmates, and because going through something like suicide, you know, it's a long road. And Chris was such a beautiful guy, man. He was the sweetest person. He was so talented. He had so much to offer that it was a real shock to hear that he had gone. But, you know, I think that mental health and depression is something that people should really take seriously. And there's a stigma attached to it that's unfortunate, because just as you take care of yourselves in every other way, I think it's important that people really try to take care of themselves in that way, too. And it ain't easy, you know, life's hard.
That's a real thing.
Look after yourselves and your
Look
mates.
after yourself, and if it looks like someone's down, way down, check on them.
Some great words.
I mean, depression ran in my family.
Yes.
Particularly the Irish side, so it gets passed down in your DNA.
Yeah.
And it's just something that it's going to pick off certain people as it goes. And my father suffered with it very greatly. Some of it got passed on to me.
You're 32 years old when you described
that was
this.
when it first really landed on me.
Exactly. You're in the car. You're driving west.
Right.
And I just this phrase, it just rang out at me: toxic confusion.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
You hit a wall. You hit a wall where you simply don't know what to do with the next day, and you're very uncomfortable in your skin. You're very unsatisfied with where you are. You're completely at loose ends, and you don't know how to continue constructing your life. You don't know. You just don't know how to step any further. Some of it is a chemical imbalance, obviously, that can strike at any different time in your life. You don't know when it's going to hit you. You know, I've had it in my 30s, I've had it in my 60s. I've often not had it, for entire decades in between. So it's very unpredictable.
Mental illness has become a big issue over here, certainly, and particularly focused on young people. There's been a huge rise in it. What advice, having lived through this, having experienced it as you have, what advice would you give the young Bruce Springsteen, the teenage Bruce Springsteen, where these problems started to, I suppose, develop and emerge?
I think the initial problems in the 1950s and 1960s, where I grew up, was there was no help for these problems, for the conditions. No one understood analysis or psychiatry or psychology. It was not a particularly reflective era in American domestic life. So most of my relatives who suffered with it just suffered with it until they died,
right.
And received very, very, very little help. My father's conditions got very extreme, and so eventually in the 70s or 80s we did seek help, and he did receive some. So it's something where both the appropriate doctors can be very, very helpful, and then the psychopharmacology, modern psychopharmacology, has a variety of drugs now that can really assist in the chemical imbalance and can really bring you back out of yourself and return your life to you. So that's been a field where there's been enormous progress since the 50s and 60s, and that'd be very valuable if somebody was suffering with it. I suppose my only advice would be, don't be afraid to seek out help wherever you can find it.
To me, mood is the equivalent of weather. Weather is real. That's the important thing to remember about weather. It is absolutely real. When it rains, it rains. It is wet, you get wet. There's no question about it. It's also true about weather that you can't control it. You can't say, if I wish hard enough, it won't rain. But it's equally true that if the weather's bad, one day it will get better. And what I had to learn was to treat my moods like the weather. On the one hand, denying that they were there and saying, I'm not really depressed, because why should I be depressed? I've got enough money, I've got a job, people like me. There's no reason to be depressed. That's as stupid as saying there's no reason to have asthma or there's no reason to have a measles. You've got it. It's there. It's not about reason. You don't get depressed because bad things happen to you. That's getting pissed off and annoyed. That's reasonable. Someone hits you in the face, you go, ow. But depression is something that happens like weather to you, inside you. And it's not about, it can be triggered by something unfortunate, but it isn't. It's not enough to talk yourself out of it by saying, but I shouldn't be depressed because I've got people who are nice to me, which is frustrating for people outside who go, don't be depressed, everyone loves you, you're really happy, you've got a good life. I know, that's what's so depressing, I can't help it. But once you, no, it's not a solution, but anyway, it's very important at least to get that stage of it out of the way, is to recognize it as a mood disorder, as something that is akin to weather. But the nature of manic depression or bipolar disorder is it's bipolar, it is two poles. It's not just depression. The point is that there is this other side to it. You have a depressed mood, you have an elevated mood, known as mania, which is the manic side of manic depression. And these hypomanic or hypermanic states stream in your optimism, in your creativity, in your energy. You go for ages without sleep. People have different ways in which their elevated moods are expressed, and they talk 19 to the dozen. They can't stop thinking. Their mind races. It can be a very blissful and exciting and extraordinary state of mind to be in. And then comes the crash. Major problems. It's not with the person who suffers the disease, it's with the rest of the world and mental health disorder and its stigma. People just are terrible at coping with it, other people. They don't like even anyone mentioning it if possible. And it is that problem of when you say to someone, I've got a broken leg or I've got diabetes, particularly you say diabetes and asthma, say, which are both chronic conditions that won't go away. People go, oh, there, do you take insulin or do you take a little wheezer thing for your asthma? And you go, yes. If you say, I've got a mental health condition, they go, oh, have you? That's nice. And then they want to be somewhere else. They don't want to be anywhere near you. And I can understand that. Of course I can understand it. But you know that it's like 6 degrees of separation. I think or 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whichever. I don't think you're ever more than 3 or 4 steps away from someone close to you who has a mental health problem. And I think the more we accept that it is us, it is part of being human, then the better we are, because then you can start concentrating on the things that matter in terms of coping with it.
This is why we want to change the way we talk about mental health. It's the reason we want to work with all of you, to have conversations at work, with your friends, with your family, to confront any notion that a mental health challenge needs to be kept quiet. For me, it's as simple as this. If you have a persistent, painful issue with your knee, you wouldn't hesitate to speak to your friends about it, or to go to the doctor to get it checked out. You do that because you know if a problem is left unaddressed, it could get worse, not better. And you don't hesitate to speak about it because you know there is no shame in a bad knee. Our mental fitness is no different. If you feel stressed or like a cloud is hanging over you, you cannot know how to fix that feeling unless you start speaking about it. What I really want to say is that if you do have the courage to speak about it, you really can make things better. Trust me. Mental health challenges are not a life sentence. Speak to your colleagues about how you cope with stress. When you go home tonight, maybe tell your kids that sometimes you struggle with your emotions and that it is okay to talk about it. Or instead, maybe pick up the phone to a friend who you suspect may be finding it hard to admit that something isn't quite right. If we are all willing to have these conversations, we will end the stigma around mental health once and for all.
And it's very important too that at the same time, having a mental health problem, a disorder, an illness, is not a bar to a fulfilling, creative, and full life. It is possible to be the best person you could ever be, to loved, to love, to live fully, and to express yourself and work and move in society with these problems. And the two things seem to contradict each other, but they don't. They're just held in a tension. And that's what has to be understood. The seriousness on the one hand, and also the fact that it is not a bar to being a full and active member of the human race and of society.
I found that with depression, one of the most important things you could realize is that you're not alone. You're not the first to go through it. You're not going to be the last to go through it. And oftentimes it happens. You feel like you're alone, and you feel like it's only you, and you're in your bubble. And I wish I had someone at that time who could just pull me aside and, hey, it's gonna be okay. It'll be okay.
It's all about the feeling I get from riding that wave. Surfing, if you catch a wave, you're hooked right then and there. I have a lot of inner demons. If I didn't have surfing to get those out of my system, I would self-destruct. Surfing is the only reason that keeps me going in a normal state, that keeps my life at an even keel. Without it, it would just tip into oblivion.
3 years ago, I won an event on the North Shore. Being the oldest guy to ever win a QS event, I was happy, just to win an event. driving back from Sunset Beach to my house at Pipeline, you know, it should have been one of the happiest times of my life, but the only thing I could think about was driving my car into a pole or something. It's a hard thing to deal with when you should be happy and you have no idea what's going on in your brain. It was just a thought, and more than wanting to actually end my life. You know, I've been dealing with that in the last couple of years and been actually doing pretty good. I mean, it's still there at times, but at least I know how to deal with it a lot better. At first, I didn't know what to do, and they had reached out and said that they had just got some sports psychologists that they wanted me to go and see. So I flew in and met with them a couple of times. It was huge, you know, to sit down and talk to someone. For me, I'm kind of prideful, you know, so for me to reach out and ask for help was really hard. I sat down and talked to him. When I left the meeting, I actually felt good. I didn't feel like something was wrong with me. I actually felt like somebody was just trying to help me get through something. I encourage people to reach out. Depression is an illness that I know a lot of people deal with, and a lot of people don't know how to reach out and get that help. But man, when you finally do reach out and you get that help, you feel so much better. Better to deal with it with people that love you, that care what happens to you, rather than sitting in the house and letting your mind, you know, run rampant. The thing that I learned about depression is, right, if you're sitting in the house by yourself, your mind can really get the best of you. But I get up every day like 4 or 5 o'clock, and literally I get out of bed, put on my clothes, and straight to work out. I didn't even brush my teeth before. I mean, I just literally like want to get it over and done with, and then I come back and do my shower, I get ready, and then my day's so much better when I do. If you can just get out, even if it's just for half an hour, you know, go for a walk, or, you know, be with people, do something productive, I think it will help a lot. I think the working out part helps a lot with the brain, because it does, you know, release some endorphins and make you feel better. Exercise is huge, and I think, you know, everybody suffering should try and get out and do some kind of exercise. The earlier the better. I have grandchildren now, and, you know, I want to live a good life. I want to be able to, you know, have fun with my kids and watch my grandkids grow old. You know, I want to live life. You know, when I was younger, I was like, you know, if I die young, it'll be fine. But, you know, that all changes when you get older. You know, knowledge is everything, and, you know, I want to be able to pass that on to my grandkids as well.